I have a guest today that I have been wanting you to meet because he has an amazing story. He has an amazing social media presence. And he's just one of those guys out there that is kind of the voice of reason in a world of chaos. So I thought you need to meet him. You need to hear from him. You need to follow him. Lieutenant Choe, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's talk about how I discovered you. I discovered your Instagram, 911 Strong. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But first, I have to ask you, because I ask every cop who comes on the show, why'd you become a cop?
Yeah, like a lot of kids, you grow up wanting to be the good guys. Me and my cousins, my group of friends, whenever we played cops and robbers, I had to be the cop. And I think it was just the way I was raised. I was destined to be a third generation soldier. My grandfather served in the Korean Navy and found a pathway to American citizenship when he became an Army CID investigator. And then my dad and his brothers both joined the Army. And so as you can imagine, we grew up in a very patriotic home. Uh, lots of rule of law, rule of rule. And so that just always stuck with me. I wanted to be the good guy, and it never went away. That desire just never went away. Even in high school, I found myself sticking up for the people that were getting bullied against. And I really, I was the captain of the football team all 4 years, and I really felt like that carried more than just the title. It carried some responsibility. So it carried over from wanting to be responsible for not just my teammates, but for the entire student body. And that didn't change. When I went to college, I thought I was going to get my degree, get my commission, and join the military, but I was recruited by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and threw my application in. And I said, if after a couple of years this isn't for me, I'll go back and join the Army. But lo and behold, it's been, well, this month, actually, it's been 25 years.
That's fantastic. So you have seen, as a police officer on one of the largest agencies in the country, you have seen this evolution of extraordinary support for us. You were on 9/11/01. You had been on the job just a couple of years, right?
Yeah, just a year and a half. So I graduated from the Sheriff's Academy in February of 2001. And, when I joined, the whole, how long the application process takes. It was in the late 90s. And so I didn't actually get hired till 99. And that's when I joined the Academy, September of 99. And all my friends were asking me why I chose this path, because we were on the heels of the riots in the mid 90s and Rodney King. And kind of like what we're seeing today, where they were struggling for hiring recruiting bodies. Nobody wanted to be a cop. Well, 9/11 happened, and that changed everything. I remember, going to do a meal pickup, and for a while, I couldn't pay for my own meals. People were so supportive of law enforcement, for the first responder world in general. And yeah, I got to see a lot being a part of the largest agency in the country. I had opportunity to do so much. The terrorism threat level raised. I got intel that just being in Los Angeles County, that a lot of other parts of the country didn't get. So after about 5 years with the Sheriff's Department, I was married. We were expecting our first child. I decided to find greener pastures, and that's what brought me to El Monte. And El Monte is a great department. It's still within LA County, just 12 miles east of downtown Los Angeles. But I took a lot of what I learned from the big agency experience and brought it to El Monte, where I'm at, and I've had a flourishing career ever since.
So look back on the last 4 years of and again, you saw all of those ups and downs where people hated us, loved us, hated us, loved us. We went through, the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. It was a completely righteous police shooting, and yet was so distorted by the media and the activists. And then, to the death of George Floyd and the riots that ensued then. And then now, even currently, with the pro-Palestinian rioters, Antifa constantly being a part of all of this. Um, and law enforcement, especially in California, having to deal with all that. Talk about these ups and downs for just a minute that you've seen during your career.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big pendulum in our career. When I started, I mentioned the pendulum was way back on the downside, and a couple of years later, it swung up, and 2015, 2013, that whole stuff happened in the Midwest, and here we are, we're in the downswing, and I keep waiting for that pendulum to swing forward, and you know, but that's a reflection of what our careers are like, even on our day-to-day basis. Forget about all the outside distraction. We encounter a lot of adversity, whether it's our own personal adversity or whether we've inserted ourselves in the community's adversity. We've got to know how to handle that. And when you make a decision to join law enforcement, you make a conscious decision that you're going to understand that you've inserted yourself in an adverse profession. There's a lot of positives, don't get me wrong, and we make an impact every day, but the media isn't our friend, and the media will take something that we've done positive, but if it optically looks bad, they're going to exploit it because it's sexy and it makes money for them. The media is no longer a fact-driven entity. They are all about themselves making money. It's a big business, so the government has a hand in that. They use them as a tool, and the police, we've always been the good guy, and the public generally and the media would like nothing more than to stick it to the good guys, the people that are supposed to do their jobs. God forbid we make one mistake, and it's a reflection on human nature, right? We're humans. People forget that the people that do this job have skin, we have guts inside, and we're going to make mistakes until the day robots and AI take over law enforcement. We're going to make human decisions and make human mistakes.
Yeah, that is incredibly well said. So when you look back, I mean, you personally have faced incredible adversity on and off the job. Talk about your journey a little bit.
Yeah, I was one of those guys that really adhered to what law enforcement experts were saying back in the 2010s. If you're a cop, stay off of social media. It's not for you. It's going to get you in trouble. Every administrator, every police expert in the country, every legal expert said cops just need to stay off social media. And I totally adhered to that because they made a lot of sense. Well, in 2012, my father, who was a vet, as I mentioned, committed suicide. He served during Vietnam, and just things were different when you served during the 70s, and he never really got rid of those demons that he was battling his entire life. So I was actually sitting in a CPR first aid course at my station, one of those annual refresher courses that we had to do. And my grandmother calls me and says that I needed to go home right away. And it was about 5 miles away. So I left the station in a rush, and I get there, and I see my father, and I think the police officer mode in me stepped in, and I tried to rescue him, but it was an effort in vain. The firefighters who came shortly after me stopped me, and he had been gone for a couple hours. But I, as an only child, I had to eat a lot of that. My parents were divorced, and I had to take care of a lot of my father's affairs, and that was a lot to handle because I had a young family. I have 4 kids and a stay-at-home wife. I was on the promotion track at work. I was a detective at the time, and just all that had to be put on pause to handle my family affairs. About a year after that, my mom is diagnosed with stage 3C ovarian cancer. And if you knew my mom, she has an incredible story. She's a fighter, and that's exactly what she did. She beat it. She went into remission, and after a year, that puts us right around 2014. And my mom's was a beautiful woman. She had a lot of men try to court her, and it was for various reasons. Sometimes it was because of her looks, sometimes it was because of her money. She was a very successful businesswoman, and she had a lot of she saw right through some of the guys that went after her material things. But she was one of those people that if she saw a stray dog on the street, she would pick him up and say, "Oh, I'll take him to the shelter," and end up keeping him. that's what she did to one of these guys. One of these guys was down on his luck, and she put him up in one of her rental properties. It was only supposed to be until he can get back on his feet, and that lasted about a year. My mom finally falls in love with a man that used to be her golf coach many, many years ago. They rekindled a friendship, and they became romantic. He proposed to her on Christmas of 2014. Um, so right around that time, she says, I've got to get rid of the baggage. She decided to kick out this guy that she put up in one of her houses, and he agreed to hand her over the keys. And this was in January of 2015 now. So just about a month later, less than a month later, actually. And she goes over there to get the keys. He assaults her, kidnaps her, ties her down inside the residence, and murders her. And then, like a coward, he killed himself. So, you know, even though my father's tragedy happened just a couple years prior, it was still just compounded everything. And if it wasn't for my tremendous faith in God, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you right now. I don't know where I would be. But I knew God had a plan. God had a reason. And that's a good lesson for all of us. If you're struggling with your own Christianity or want to know God, a lot of the things that He does is beyond our comprehension and understanding. And I read the Bible every year all the way through, and I'm reminded of some of the stories that happened, especially in the Old Testament times. It was just barbaric. And we see what happened to the Israelites back then, and we see what happened to Israel today. It's just, and people ask, how can God allow these things to happen? Well, you have to trust that it's beyond our comprehension, and there's a plan and a reason. After my mom's tragedy, I turned to social media because I needed a distraction, and I found that it was therapeutic for me to share my story of adversity and how I overcame it, and it gained traction. People just flocked to it, and before you know it, some of my testimonies became viral, and my platform grew. Podcasts such as yours podcast found me and wanted me to share my testimony, and now I've got over 500,000 followers in my platforms combined. I had my own podcast for a while, and really the value behind that is there's a lot of other people going through what I went through, or even tragedy that isn't to the level, to the degree I went through. They may be struggling at work, struggling in their marriage, and the fact that I can tell them I went through something as bad as I did, and I can make it and still be fruitful in my life, and be positive, really resonated with a lot of people. So,
And that's one of the things that I appreciate about what you do is because I'm a Christian too, and you are unabashed in your faith, and that's what we are called to do as Christians. And I think for first responders, especially cops, that faith is just it's extraordinarily healing, to the point where I look at police officers who don't have faith and I kind of wonder how they do it, because you saw as a cop, stuff we all see every day, just horrible stuff happening to people's families, and then those things happen to your family. And as cops, we're told, well, don't talk about it, keep it down, all those kind of things. And you did just the opposite, and you married that with your faith. You were open, and you talked about your faith, and you talked about tragedy, and that's how you've been able to help people.
Yeah, I think if you open that door, people are going to walk in, and not everybody does. Some people were critical of me being so open about it because, as you know, if you were a cop in the 90s and early 2000s, that was exactly the lesson, as you mentioned. We just don't talk about it. You suck it in. Cops don't cry. Cops don't share emotions. And I actually believed, I subscribed to that because, they knew better than me. But once I got some tenure under me, and I experienced the personal tragedy in my life, and I realized how therapeutic it was, I encouraged others to share it. And it became useful because just a short time later in 2022, we lost two officers in a shooting at my department. And it was it rocked our worlds. We've lost officers in the past, but it was before my time, and we had a pretty successful run of not really having tragedy within our department. And it happened, and I'm so glad it happened when it did, because the mindset had changed within law enforcement. People were talking about opening up. We know now that PTSD and suicide is a huge within our profession. And so I'm so glad we had a chief at the time that was open to it, brought in therapists, brought in counseling aides, and encouraged people to talk about it. And he put us in a position where it wasn't voluntary. He made everybody go through it. And you could walk in there and say, I don't want to talk, and that's fine. But he made it so that everybody had to participate. So it wasn't no longer taboo. It became a regular thing that everybody knew they had to do their time. And after a while, people got desensitized to it, inoculated to the whole idea that it was taboo, and it's become a regular presence. And that chief, unfortunately, passed away just a short time after the tragedy. He was my best friend since we were 14 years old. We were both captains on the football team. We were in each other's weddings. It's hard to, it's not easy for a lot of people to say that they maintain their best friends since high school, and to join the same career and still maintain that relationship. But he had a very rare cancer at the time, and it was aggressive. He was actually told he had terminal cancer the day he found out our officers were shot. He was sitting on the doctor's table when that happened. And he told the doctor, unfortunately, the news about the cancer wasn't the worst news he received that day.
Because the murder of your two officers that day in 2022, this was, and to remind people, this was in kind of the middle of the whole anti-cop, defund the police situation. In fact, talk about the incident for a minute, because it really, those of us in law enforcement remember it, but I think the general public remembers it because it really shocked the conscience of a lot of people. Talk about that.
Yeah, June 14th is a day I'll never forget. I was actually about a mile and a half down where the shooting site was just leaving a training class. There was about 50 of us in a training class, and some of us had our radios in our vehicles. And as soon as we went to our cars, we heard the traffic and we bolted over there. And I remember being down the street, hearing the rounds going. This individual, you bring up the whole defunding the police movement and stuff like that, but it was actually bigger than that in LA County. We hired we've citizens voted in a DA named George Gascon, and I'm sure you've heard his name before. And he really is not a friend to law enforcement, even though he was prior law enforcement. Everywhere he's gone, he's made it so that criminals can walk the street. And this guy right here should have been in prison. The suspect in this case should have been a two-striker. He had a gun on him. Officers responded to a call where a woman said she was being stabbed. And when officers arrived, the woman, before they even had time to set up a game plan and set up at the door, the woman opens the door and runs out. And lo and behold, the suspect is right there at the door. He's half dressed. He's got one pant leg on, and he's holding it up with his hand. The two officers that were there, they were in a unique dynamic. We had one officer that had about 22 years on. He was a senior officer, knew the job very well. And then we had a rookie who had about a year at our department. Very sharp. He had a bright future at our agency. Very aggressive, as a young officer would be, to pursue this suspect. And unfortunately, they were sucked into the room. The guy that was seemingly holding up his pants was actually concealing a weapon in his waistband. And he just got two lucky shots off. I mean, the officers just didn't have a chance. And when we got out there, the responding officers, like I said, were there within 30 seconds. A gun battle happened at the motel. It spilled over onto the streets. The suspect was on PCP, so the rounds that penetrated his body really had no effect on him. It wasn't until he knew he couldn't move anymore that he took his own life. And now we're just dealing with the aftermath.
And I think, I know that incident really kind of reawakened people's interest in these, far left Soros installed prosecutors like George Gascon. He was one of the first.
Mhm.
And I think that was helpful in showing people that this decarceration that people like Gascon and activists and other politicians talk about is absolutely detrimental to the people of this nation, not just a law enforcement, um, really, but to everybody. And that will be the legacy of the murder of your two officers. Talk about your platform, where people can find it, and what they can expect to hear from you.
Yeah, I'm really blessed that I have an administration that supports what I do. There's a lot of people in my profession that try to use social media, and it really isn't a positive thing. They do it for personal reasons, personal gain, notoriety, and their departments just aren't about that. And I'm lucky that my department allowed me to do this. So if you want to find me on Instagram, it's at 911, just like the numbers, and then strong, all one word. And I'm typically most active on Instagram, although I'm present on the other platforms as well. Instagram is where I do most of my engagement because I feel like this generation spends a lot more time on Instagram. But to go back real quick on the George Gascon thing, even though it was tragic, you're absolutely right. The spillover has been positive. The news is finally realizing, the people are fed up. The people that voted him in actually are like, you know what? I thought this was going to be a positive thing. And now, I'm getting my cars broken into, my homes. The businesses are raising their prices because of petty theft, and the prosecutors aren't doing anything about it. And if you're a good law enforcement agency, you're doing your job, you're making your arrests, but it's really disheartening when you do all that work to arrest somebody and the DA drops the charges.
Lieutenant, we can't thank you enough for spending time with us today. And if you would like more information about the National Police Association, visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Join the National Police Association in supporting our brave men and women in blue. Every day they put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Black Lives Matter, Antifa, progressive prosecutors, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremists like George Soros and woke companies like Amazon, Coca-Cola, Microsoft, and Google, to name a few. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating just $5 to keep us in the fight. Together, we can win. That is National